Hey, welcome everybody, and thank you for being here. We are here on another episode of the Smarter Campus podcast where we are changing education one conversation at a time. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Marc Watkins, Assistant Director of Academic Innovation at the University of Mississippi and Director of AI Institute for Teachers, a leader in the AI literacy and its role in education. Marc works at the intersection of pedagogy and technology, training faculty and shaping policy on the generative AI world. Marc, thank you so much for being here. If you could kind of give everyone just a little more introduction to what you're doing.
Thanks, Zach. I appreciate that. Yeah, I know it's a mouthful. Basically, we work with teachers one-on-one about how generative tools are affecting their everyday practice in the classroom, work with students to talk about ways that they can ethically adopt this tool, try to bridge the gaps between these different sort of silos that are popping up across different universities of people who want to adopt at first, people who want to resist. We want to look for practical pathways forward where we can kind of get people talking with each other. So that's what I do here at the University of Mississippi, and we also take this show on the road. And I was just at CSU Bakersfield and a few other different K through 12 organizations as well too.
Amazing. I mean, you're doing some pretty incredible stuff. And one thing that I'm really interested in is how'd you get into this space?
Well, I approached this as a writer, and I found out about generative AI about, maybe 6, 7 months before ChatGPT was released. I panicked like everyone did, and then I sat down and was given a clear charge from my chair and from our faculty development executive director of academic innovations here too, to try to see if we can actually use this technology to help students and try to go through that. So we had a little bit of a head start. And I approached this really as a curious skeptic to think about how the technology can work that's really potentially helpful for students too, but also being skeptical about some of the claims we're seeing from the big companies about this leading to human flourishing and all this other stuff. And we can kind of get into it in the podcast today, but I think if people are looking at Grok 3 and the not safe for work mode, they can kind of question about if that's actually leading to human flourishing or not.
Yeah, I mean, let's dive right into that. I mean, do you think this actually is right now the path that we're on? Do you think we're leading towards human flourishing?
No, I think the one thing that's very critical about how these tools are released is this massive public experiments without any sort of guidelines or guardrails. They're pulling these tools out left and right and different features and updates just to see how society deals with them. And that's a recipe for chaos. Obviously, this technology can be really helpful, can lead to scientific breakthroughs. If you use it carefully and intentionally, it can really help students with learning outcomes, especially in the educational space, but we're not really seeing that sort of from the developer standpoint. We haven't had stability in the tools to the point where we can really even adopt them within our own everyday practice. It changes so rapidly that even being able to keep up with all the different technology that is released is completely impossible. I think even I follow Ethan Mollick a lot on social media. I think a lot of people in the space do too. Even he is exhausted by this. He can't even keep up with it, and that's his sort of deal that he has now through the Wharton Business School and their AI institute that they have set up there. And if Ethan Mollick can't keep up, I don't know how anyone else can keep up either.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing that I think is super interesting is like teachers have kind of become a middleman, right? Of like translating this into society. Cause like that OpenAI report that was released, I mean, a large amount of their users is college students, right? And it's like
Yep.
it's kind of fallen on the shoulders of teachers. So like who do you think's responsible for this, really? Like, do you think it's the big companies? Like it's kind of now fallen on teachers? Like, how do you think that space should really be working?
Well, ideally, it would be the companies setting some limitations within their products. We know that generative tools work the best, especially in chatbot interfaces, if you put it into a Socratic mode where it doesn't just give you the answer right off the bat. A lot of these tools, though, you have to force them to do that by prompt engineering. Well, people don't have those skills set up to do so. And yet we don't see the actual developers building interfaces that sort of support that. You have to sort of bring that yourself. So I do think it's the developer's responsibility. They're not going to accept that, so that puts it on the teachers. I will also say administrators don't really want to accept it either, too. So it all falls back down on teachers too. And so what I've been really talking to faculty about and staff in K through 12 too is how you can make this sustainable for yourself, how you can sort of start looking at what you can bring to the classroom. And the one thing I will say to this is that we feel like we don't have much power in this situation too, because this is again something we never asked for. But the agency that we have is in how you shape a entire generation's sort of understanding of how this technology works. Your students are going to remember how you talk about AI with them for years to come, largely because it's probably going to be the first conversation they have with an authority figure about this. And that is extraordinarily powerful in this concept. So if you are feeling powerless as a teacher too, sitting down, having conversations with your students, making that part of your class and talking about how AI is changing things is going to be the most powerful sort of impact you're going to have within this space.
Yeah. I mean, so it sounds like, I mean, you're doing some pretty incredible stuff with teachers. And I know a thing a lot of people struggle with is like, how do you foster that agency? You know, like how do you bring that empowerment to those teachers so that they can do that?
Well, you really have to get them their actual. The biggest thing that I have about AI, my sort of, I'm collecting my thoughts here for just a second.
Yeah.
My biggest concern about AI is that, especially for teachers, there's a huge now shift from students using AI to complete exams and other sort of things to write their essays to teachers using it as instructional design like Copilot. The whole sales pitch is that it gives you back time. And, I tell teachers that's okay to think about like that, but this technology has to do more than just time. We never want AI or any technology for that matter to speak to the material conditions of our classroom and ourselves and our jobs. And that's really what a lot of teachers are thinking about too. So what we try to do here at the University of Mississippi with the Mississippi AI Institute
Yep.
is sit down with teachers one-on-one, face-to-face, have AI skeptics and AI adopters in the same room together. We do this usually 2 or 3 times a year over a 3 to 4 day period where we bring them together to talk about basic AI literacy practices, how this is working out in the classroom, what different tools they might want to consider using, and really just getting them to think about how this works and how it's changing their actual practice. So we found that to be best. We've tried asynchronous learning, we've tried doing coursework and other things, but the technology just changes so quickly. You can't really keep up with it.
How do you stay up to date?
It's, well, it's a big part of my job now, but even like I said before too, it's almost impossible to stay up to date. I try to write about 3 or 4 different things in Substack, and I keep it saved there. Like I almost treat like Substack rough drafts as like a Google Doc. You go back to it, you see what's going on in your different socials, whether that's LinkedIn and Blue Sky. And unfortunately, I'm still on Twitter, even though I think most of the academics have left that space. I'm just there just to see how people are dealing with it. Um, and then I just try to order it together too to put some clarity and some insight on what's going on with it. And about every 2 weeks, I try to publish something. Sometimes a little bit more than that, sometimes a little bit less.
So, I mean, I know you're really intertwined with kind of like all breadths of life on this in this space. Like, how would you say the general public is feeling right now?
I think that they are on a very different wavelength than what the AI developers are. If you are really into AI right now, too, it's basically like an iPhone new release is coming out every few months, and you have to buy the new iPhone. You have to do this. Well, everyone else in society hasn't actually gone into a cell phone yet. They're still locked on landlines for this sort of analogy to work. They're not even there yet. They played around with ChatGPT maybe, but that's really their extent of their actual interest in generative AI. Most people who are in jobs have their skills already set. They aren't exactly looking for an AI assistant at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, a question I have that's kind of like, and it's kind of a tough question, and feel free to pass on this one if you want. But like, I mean, one thing I think is super interesting, ChatGPT came out 2.5, 3 years ago, right? And then a few months ago, I think 4 months ago, the ChatGPT for education popped up, right? Like they started launching that initiative. And like one thing that I've seen is like teachers kind of feel like, hey, what happened? Like you guys have been around for so long. Why are you now trying to come help? Like, what are your thoughts on that kind of situation?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on that situation. No, they're not always great. I think that they did make a pivot to education. They did release a student guide for writing with ChatGPT. I think that was a little bit too little, too late. They knew early on, from what we understand from publications in the press too, and some of their actual public comments, that students were one of the most, in terms of a population, the power users of these tools, the early
Yep.
adopters of these tools. And that does, in my mind, seems like they should be treating this as an ed tech and actually going through that whole process of making it safe, making it reliable, making it accessible to everyone, including their actual big tools that they have available if that's what they want. Um, I don't think that they're there yet. And they sort of came to this sort of conclusion much later than everyone else in the education space. Again, that's on that's maybe not completely on them because again, they don't have educators on their staff, at least they didn't when they launched. So it's a very different sort of feeling to have that situation.
Yeah. So like off of that, how do you, because right now, and I mean, from my understanding, it's like a race to the AGI moon is kind of what I
Yeah,
like to say,
yeah.
right? Like they're backpedaling because they need to kind of find quick fixes to the problems ahead. But like how do you educate teachers on like the intentions behind these companies, right? Because like the big players are not tech companies like you just mentioned. Like how do you bring up the environment, safety, all that stuff?
Well, we put that into two different categories. One about just how the tools work, that's just AI literacy, very basic. But critical AI literacy, we try to talk with faculty about so they can then navigate this with their students about the environmental impact, about potential job loss, skill loss, about all these different things too, including the rhetoric and the hype that's being used to sell these tools. And what I really focus on, and I think what faculty take away from this is that if they don't want to adopt an AI tool and bring it in their classroom, that's fine. You can still talk with your students in a critical way about how this is changing our world and get them to think about that more or less than anything else. We would really go beyond good and bad dichotomies about AI because it's here, it's not going away. We want to start to find some nuance and really talk to students about, okay, this technology exists. You may have used it in the past. What is this actually giving you and the way that you use this? Is this actually helpful to you and the skills you're trying to learn and going forward in the workforce? Or are you just using this as a time-saving device? If it's the latter, we want you to think about if that's really what you want to do when you go into a educational, sort of institution, whether you're in
Yeah.
college or K through 12.
I mean, I really like that because it's like kind of you're grouping AI into two, there's many more groups than the two that you
Oh yeah.
mentioned. But like what you're saying is like, are you going to think about this to think critically or are you going to use this to save time? And like, how have you seen that change students and teachers' perspectives kind of when you lay those two tracks out?
They really do start thinking about their own sort of use of the technology in a lot of ways. And they get a little bit more critical beyond just AI, because it's not just that. We pull out their cell phones. We talk about how many hours they spend on different social media apps. We talk about how many apps they download on their phones and how they never looked at the terms of service on any of these things before we sort of blindly adopt this tool or this technique that we put into our lives. And so we have those conversations and we really use that space, especially if you're teaching in person. You can do it online. It's a little bit different to do this when you're trying to teach an asynchronous class. Um, but it is something that can give them some time to sort of slow down. The one thing we talked about is that when ChatGPT was launched, it offers a user a frictionless experience. You enter a prompt, you get a result. Doesn't matter if the result's accurate or not, filled with errors or as they're called hallucinations in the AI world. It gives you a very authoritative sounding actual output. We ask people to slow down and think about what goes on in that entire process. Like, why are you going to this prompt in this first place? Why are you using this tool instead of using your own skills? What's being gained through this? What's being lost? And when you really set it up that way too, students really do begin to think critically, and I think faculty do too.
So have you seen that like a lot of faculty have opened up those conversations after your training with them?
Oh yeah, faculty that are interested in being trained and talking about generative AI are really interested in discussing this. It's the faculty that are so upset by this, so revolted by this, that they don't even want to have conversations with students about it. They want to just stick a actual boilerplated policy on their syllabus and not have a conversation about AI. They want to just try to ban it to make it go away. And the reasons the way they want to do this are legitimate, they're valid, they're
Yeah.
upset, but it's not actually practical. If you were going to basically just think about this in different terms, if there was an epidemic of teens having premarital sex, you could say that there is an ethical stance to say we just want abstinence only education to do this. That's ethical. That's something you can basically argue with this, but that's not really practical for how actual young people look at things. I just went to that terrible way of basically comparing AI to premarital sex, but that's kind of where we are right now.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you, it makes a lot of sense. It's that same like, it's gonna happen anyways, so we should talk about it in a critical manner rather than just saying don't do this. I mean, what's some of the
Yeah.
things that have really led to a lot of success at University of Mississippi? I mean, you guys are kind of leading the charge from my understanding.
Well, we really did. We never got rid of our humanities programs. We really
Okay.
approached this from a mixture of both STEM and humanities fields too. So that was been really helpful. We have a Center for Practical Ethics here too that's been really interested in leaning in AI. We have an Institute for Data Science that has done this too, and we also have a really vibrant Department of Writing and Rhetoric, which I'm part of. And that's all sort of come together to talk about how these different tools are shaping how students work. And we really are looking at this from a human centric point of view, first of all.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I want to touch on there is that you kind of mentioned that like you brought the data science and the humanities stuff, like there's conversations between everyone. And I think one thing that is really hard for people in this space is that they feel like I'm not a tech person, I can't do this. Like, how do you kind of empower those people to feel like you don't have to be a tech person to understand this?
Well, that's the kind of the amazing thing about working with a chatbot is that your natural language is what actually powers it in terms of the applied version of this when you take it out. You don't need to necessarily know the sort of actual machine learning behind it too, or how neural networks function. It can be really helpful in a lot of ways. But in terms of the applied aspect of this in your daily life, if you have a background in humanities, your ability to engineer prompts are just basically about your imagination and your sort of control of language. And that's been really sort of impactful to see people in the humanities who really adopted certain aspects of this to understand, oh, wow, it's based off of how well I structure my prompts, how well I ask questions. And that is a skill I'm trying to teach my students. So there is that intersection between the sort of critical thinking and existing skill sets we're trying to do now with what this technology can offer to them.
I mean, it's great to see because I think one thing that people really struggle with is that there's just so much fear around all of this, right? And
Yeah.
I think what you're doing is kind of like addressing the fear. And I think people miss that a lot, right? Like people are like, we just need to use it. It's like, I mean, what you've said multiple times throughout this chat we've had is that like you're acknowledging this sucks and it's really hard for you. And but we're gonna move through it together. I mean, what like fostered that? Like, how did you begin down that road of just acknowledging the problem at the source, I guess?
Well, again, my department teaches first year writing students, and we have about 6,000 of them every year. We very quickly looked at AI detection, found out that that was not reliable in academic contexts. And we realized that if we wanted to actually have meaningful, impactful change about how our students use this technology ethically, we're going to have those conversations with them. We're going to have to use the existing sort of structure of how we teach reflection in our writing classes as a way for students to actually engage how they're using these different tools and looking at the world around them. And we're also going to have to bring them in and use the conference because we actually conference with our students quite a bit. Every teacher is required to do at least one in-person conference, and there are other classes that we teach that are writing specific where you'll do at least 3 or 4 conferences a semester where you sit down with your teacher face to face. It's really hard to say you're using a chatbot when your actual teacher's talking with you in person and asking you about your ideas. That's where this sort of thing, we don't even need an AI detector in that sort of context. You can really sort of discern very quickly, are these ideas your own? Is this language your own? Okay, if it's not, well, let's have a conversation about why that is. Not about taking you up on charges, not about accusing you of using AI. What about this was so alluring to you that you chose to use this instead of your own voice? Because that's what I want to hear in these sorts of actual conversations is that voice. And that's what I want to see in the writing too.
I mean, that's awesome. What's the feedback from students on that? Like, how's that been received?
Well, they're happy about it. I think that when they can sit down and talk to you about it, but it's not necessarily something that is gone across the board so far. We'll have frank conversations with students, and they'll be very open about how they use these tools in other classes. And that's really concerning to me because they'll be like, well, I know I have to use this ethically in this class, but I'm using it all the time in my science class. I was like, oh, whoa, 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 time out now. Let's talk about this too. Um, so I think we need to have much more of, for lack of a better word, a full court press, thinking about this beyond just one sort of academic division. It has to be across the curriculum. It really has to be something that is fostered throughout this.
I mean, that's great. It's funny, like I've talked to a few of the leaders in the space on the show, and the number one thing that everyone does the exact same is that I just open up the conversation. And it's really just, I mean, I learned something every time I talk to one of you, but like really it's incredible. I mean, the things that are leading to success are opening the conversation. And it's just
Yep.
like, it seems simple, but I think it's hard for teachers to do. So like for someone that's, follows you on LinkedIn and like I know you keynote all these different places all the time, like what's like a bite-sized piece of advice that you'd have for some teacher that's kind of struggling in this space right now?
Instead of policy, instead of any of that, embrace a sort of framework of open disclosure. And you can model this for your students too. If you use any type of tool, whether that's from OpenAI or from Boodlebox or anything else, disclose how you're using that and show that how you use that for your students. You can build a PowerPoint that uses AI and you can have a label there too that says how you disclose this too. That sets the ethical framework we want to actually do and have these conversations with our students. Because we're never going to learn how students are actually using AI or how we're using it if we just hide behind policies that aren't being followed. We have to have open conversations with that, and it's only going to really happen if we have open disclosure of when people use AI.
Thank you. I mean, it's super cool because I mean, I was just in college and like, I mean, I had the experience of talking to teachers where they would have no chat GBT on their syllabus. And it's like,
Right.
what if I use Claude? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
is, am I
Yeah.
allowed to do that? And it's like, if I would have had a teacher that was like, I'm using it for this, tell me how you're using it. It like catches you, like it adds that ethical, it puts the ethics on your shoulders, which I feel like a lot of people act like students are just cheaters, but I think they're just confused. And I think what you just said really paints a picture for them on like what they should be doing. So big question, one of my last ones, we're coming up on time. If you could snap your fingers and change one thing about education, what would happen after you snapped your fingers? As I asked everybody this question.
Actually funding teachers to actually deal with this time and not just giving them money, giving them time and space, course releases, giving them fellowships, giving them more institutes, more actual professional development. We've been trying to talk with administration everywhere we go too about how this has to be more than just a single sort of learning opportunity for faculty. It has to be a continuum because AI is changing too, and they have to keep up with it. So we need to fully support them through this process.
So, like, what does that look like, right? Like, if you could set up a program that does exactly what that does, just for people that are looking for answers for this.
Well, I think the one thing we want to do is look at actually establishing centers, which already exist on every sort of university campus, whether it's centers for teaching and learning to or academic innovation units, and work with them as this sort of like focus point where they can bring in and support different departments as they go through this. So that might be fellowships, that might be reading groups, that might be institutes like we launched here too. It also might be course buyouts. I think it's going to be a combination of all those things. What makes it radically different is those all exist. They're just not all really funded very well. We see these sort of like things that happen for once or twice a semester and then they're over with and they don't repeat. It's going to have to be something we really think about for the next 4 or 5 years at least.
Okay, I like that a lot because what you're saying is that it's not like, okay, we're gonna have an AI day on campus and everyone's gonna learn how to do it. It's like twice a year, 3 times a year, we're gonna come together and we're gonna pay you to take time out of your underpaid, overworked schedule to come work here and like educate yourself. I mean, it's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, last question for you. This one's kind of a fun one. What's your favorite way to use AI outside of education? Like I love it for cooking. That's the
For
example.
cooking.
Yeah.
Well, I was just playing around with Claude, the new 3.7 that came out for Sonnet, and it was really great creating new artifacts that are ways you can actually basically create a coded sort of way of looking at the world a different way. You could create games, diagrams, and I'm looking at that as ways to supplement when we do presentation or my own writing too, and it's really fascinating. I love using it like that.
It's like the Pokemon. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw the Pokemon thing. Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah, having the ability to use your own imagination. If you really don't have deep coding skills to actually look at it as it codes itself using React or whatever language it's using too, is pretty amazing for a lot of lay users to see.
Yeah, well, Marc, thank you so much for being here. I learned a lot. I'm sure people listening are going to learn a lot. I know you're a busy guy, so thank you so much for taking time out of the day to chat with me.
Thank you, Zach, for having me. I really appreciate it.